I'm back in my dressing ground to discuss a language insufficiency hypothesis some more. I'm Bry Willis. I work primarily in the philosophy of language. The title of the book should be a dead giveaway. To recap, the language insufficiency hypothesis claims that as conceptual complexity increases, language effectiveness decreases. Simple. I'd be remiss not to mention that links to the book are in the description. Let's crack on. In a prior video, I discussed the general layout of the chart and of the four categories from invariants, contestables, fluids, and ineffables. I spent a bit of time on invariants. In this segment, I'll discuss the effectiveness and presumed effectiveness horizons. Take a look at the chart. The language effectiveness complexity gradient. Notice the shape of the curve as it slopes downward from invariants to ineffables, crossing through contestables and fluids. Notice the thicker line. This represents ordinary communication. Regarding invariants, notice that even some of these words may not be 100% effective. A little effort can increase communication to 100%. I won't spend time here discussing this gap. I want to discuss contestables and fluids. These are both what I informally term as weasel words. Contestables are concepts where disagreement is about the answer. Fluids are concepts where disagreement is about what the question even is. This is why language effectiveness is lower. Contestables still presuppose a shared frame. People arguing about justice, fairness, freedom, or merit may never agree, but they're at least playing the same game. They can point, accuse, rebut, cite precedences, gesture at counterexamples. Language still does real work here, poorly, noisily, inefficiently, but recognizably. Fluids are where that shared frame dissolves. These are concepts like identity, meaning, authenticity, harm, trauma, lived experience. The disagreement isn't about interpretation, but about ontology. Each speaker is smuggling in a different background theory, a different moral grammar, often a different metaphysical weather system. Language hasn't failed spectacularly, it has simply stopped coordinating everything. The reason this distinction matters is, with contestables, the argument feels productive even if it isn't. With fluids, more argument usually makes things worse because everyone thinks they're clarifying when they're actually multiplying assumptions. This is why people keep talking past each other whilst becoming increasingly confident they're being precise. Both look like weasel words on the surface, but only contestables is still tethered to a common map. Fluids are, well, fluid, untethered. I'm working on new material to explain these tethers and lack thereof. Meantime, just accept this hypothetically and on face value. Notice that, like invariants, contestables and fluids still have space above the thick line where communication can be improved. However, they each run into the effectiveness horizon. Communication cannot improve beyond this point. Take note of a few things. 1, the improvement can never reach 100% for these concepts. 2, contestables can reach closer to 100% than fluids. 3, ineffables are already at 0, so no improvement can be made. This is why the curve is shaped as it is. Let's step back for a few moments. Please note that this curve is an approximation and not to scale. It may be actually flatter or steeper. The point is that language effectiveness decreases as conceptual complexity increases. What this looks like needs empirical assessment. Also note, there's another curve above the effectiveness horizon. This is the presumed effectiveness curve. We think we are communicating at a level better than we are, but as we've just discussed, we can't get there. So why is this important? Why publish a book? Intuitively, I've felt for years, decades really, that more time and effort can't close the gap. I've been on the internet since before the World Wide Web. As a trained economist, I'd enter into political conversations about communism, Marxism, socialism, and so on. These concepts are well defined in economics, but in public forums, communism almost always means Cold War Soviet USSR. No amount of educating that this is not communism by definition, Marx would not have approved of the instantiation. The USSR violated the historical vector that needed to pass through an industrial age, and the Soviet system still retained a political class. Be this as it may, this explanation always fell on deaf ears. What we end up with is a common lexicon with an uncommon semantic base. Look also at socialism and semantic drift. To some, it means communism, the Soviet-era flavor. To others, it's the promise of Scandinavian governance. Another example I like is contract law. We all have a visceral reaction to having to read a contract. Legal scholars might lead one to believe that adding more words adds clarity. The language insufficiency hypothesis says otherwise. The added words only open avenues for interpretation. That it takes a specially trained person to interpret a contract should be evidence enough that communication effectiveness has decreased. The additional words add at least as much signal as noise. Borrowing from economics, the language effectiveness complexity gradient behaves like a production possibilities frontier and is subject to diminishing marginal returns to effort. One might consider the belief that more effort will lead to better results as specious or an anti-pattern because our intuition tells us otherwise. It tells us we should be able to communicate at the presumed effectiveness curve, but you can't get there from here. In the book, I share other examples and details. In a future segment, I'll discuss the optimist like Steven Pinker who believes that language works good enough. I disagree. Anyway, I'm out of time. If this was useful, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, share, be notified, ring the bell. It's probably not your first rodeo. You've got this. If you think I'm off course or on, let me know in the comments below. This has been another video in a series on A Language Insufficiency Hypothesis. More to follow. Cheers.